Welcome back to the big board. We're looking at Korsun Pocket. Pocket? I keep saying Pocket. Pocket. Pocket 2. Pre-production copy, right? We've all had that little conversation. If you've not seen the videos before, go back and watch some of the earlier videos on this particular title. Fortunate enough to be one of the 4 or 5 folks that have received a copy to, I wouldn't call it review, but just to play test a little bit and, see if there's big issues, little issues, but then also see how the game plays and talk about it a little bit and help the guys try and, drum up a few orders and get to that pre-order number that they need. And they're only 100 or so off from it. All right, let's have a look and see what the status is. We're 3/4 of the way through the Soviet turn and turn 4, which is the 4th of February AM turn. Game is split up into AM, PM turns, then a night turn, and then if you want to have extra night, which is kind of like extra dark night, you can do that for a price, which ends up being fatigue and also very expensive when it comes to actually fighting, and you can't use artillery and can't use air, of course. So anyway, we're in the AM turn for the Soviets. Big push by Baki, Ren's 16th and 17th Panzer, 1st Panzer, SS Panzer guys. Where do they go? They're here, pushing up this way. We are on the pace or slightly off the pace for the historical. Historical approach was a little bit further to the, I guess that's to the west and north. I think it was pretty much running from, and I'm guessing here because I looked at the maps that were in the book that I'm looking at, and it doesn't necessarily have the same towns or the same town names, and there's a little bit of different spelling on things. So I'm guesstimating roughly where the approach was, and I'm going to just zoom the camera over there. In fact, let's do that if I can gently adjust. And we'll zoom in and have a look over here. So this is the area. This road, pretty much, this bridge, so Vasily, Kut, and then this Kozyakovka, and then across to Karkanekov here, I think is roughly where the area was. So it's kind of a band coming this way. So the Germans actually just pounded through 40th Army and got up to the river, but really didn't have a lot of success forming a bridgehead or, of course, breaking much further through to the 4th map and connecting with the pocket, right? So I elected to take the path of least resistance. And my idea was to hey there, easy there, big boy. Press here. From Rekodub across to Orly / Lizyanka here. And use this as, and our goal, if you've watched the other videos, is that we just really want to try and establish a bridgehead. We're not trying to get to these victory locations and create the decisive victory for the Germans. I think that's super unattainable and not really viable. But there is potential for us to create a victory situation for the Germans and make life very difficult for the Soviets by choosing this area. There are a significant number of bridges here that will require either demolition or defense. And while there's some issues with choosing this area, which I'm going to get to in a second, I'm going to cross my fingers and try not to forget to talk about it. But this area, I thought had the most potential because there was the least number of units to fight. And because of the way some of the rules are written for the setup and immobilization of some of the Soviets, while it goes against the grain a little bit with the don't be a schmuck rule 1.1, that's for the benefit of Jack Rady, the designer. I was very careful about how I approached the attack so that I could minimize the number of units that I released from their frozen status, right? The rules are the rules. That's the way the game plays. You play the game that way, and you work it out. And if it's totally out of bounds and it gives us a massively ahistorical result, well, then we can house rule or make adjustments or refer back to rule 1.1. And Kevin will be less of a schmuck next time. But nevertheless, 34th, 17th Panzer and 16th Panzer, and there's another division in here somewhere. It's not 75th. There's another one in here somewhere. They are 198th. They have been pressing up. And 16th Panzer has taken the left flank. Let me just zoom out a little bit. Taking the left flank, and their job is to kind of push the forces back, push the Soviet forces back, and allow us the opportunity as the German player to try and build some sort of defensive line here. It'll be pretty thin, but build the defensive line here on the right flank, screen off 5th Guard Tank Corps, which is pretty weak now that I've got into the combats, and I've done 20 or 30 of them now. I'm starting to get a feel for the combat system. Look, it's not GOS, right? It's not the I forget what that's called. What is it? It should be called the Granular Operating Scale System, but it's the Grand Operational System series. It's not that granular a combat, but it does have enough mods to keep it interesting. We've got terrain modifications, you've got armor differentials. You're going to be looking at these AT factors and armor factors. Got you out of screen again. Sorry about that. Let me just pop down here. Where were we? I was pointing to this guy here with the 3. And I think that guy's got a 3 as well. So we would compare those differentials, and that's going to give us column shifts. And then there's air, abstracted air in it as well, and supply influences and regimental integrity and all that sort of good stuff. So enough to keep it interesting, and enough for you to be thinking about who's going to attack where, what combination of forces makes sense based on what I'm looking at in terms of potential defenders. There's a soft element of recon here where when you move adjacent to a unit or a stack, you're allowed to then look at that stack, but then you're committed to make that into a combat. There's a lot of little nuances that are kind of scattered through the rules that, the rules I'll say this is are a little verbose and a little too wordy for my liking, and not succinct and crisp enough so that you can kind of get to the meat of it pretty quickly. But that is what it is. They're cleaned up significantly from the first version, so that's a big plus. And there are some modest minor changes, the biggest being change to the supply rules for artillery. So anyway, 17th Panzer is screening off on the right, 16th on the left. Up the middle, as I said, Bunky and Rennes with the combination of the whatever infantry is available. We're slowly bringing up the artillery. We're going to talk about artillery in a second as well. It's one of my little pet peeves. And then 1st SS Panzer staging here, looking to see where the fight is really going to sort of, where the potential for the crossing, the bridgehead is going to be. And then we're going to just pound on that, right? Now, all of that said, at some point off in the distance over here, we're going to see a second Soviet army come onto the board, and they then are going to have the decision to make, are they going to come and try and cut supply here? You hit the flank here, or come all the way down here and totally cut off supply for everybody, or are they going to come and knock out this bridgehead? What's going to be most effective for them as a player, right? As the defender for the Soviets, we have scrambled, probably partially due to some, ill-advised setup, some less than optimal setup, and then I may or may not have made 1 or 2 errors with the releasing of units, but I believe I released the units on time so that they were able to move. But what I chose to do was to sacrifice some units to slow down the German advance. And I think that's been a little expensive. We can see in the distance here that we kind of zoom in a little bit here. Maybe I just move this whole stand without knocking things over. Hey now. we've got remnants of 167th, remnants of 359th are in there as well. I've got the 5th Mechanized Corps is kind of scrambling to get across here. And then I've got 5 Guard Tank, which pretty soft, but they are racing up the road here to try and slow down these forces here. Here we're trying to block supply for these guys, which then probably brings me to one of the most important points here that's different from most other games that I've played and adds an element to the game that I think is pretty fascinating. And obviously it does have some potential for some gaminess, if you want to use that term. But the ability to build fortifications, first of all, but more importantly, build roads. And by that I mean these roads here. There's a white road here as well. It's a primary road, secondary road. You can construct roads. So I can build my own supply line. Sounds fantastic, right? I think it's 2 hexes a turn per engineering unit. I'd have to double check that to have a look at it. I'm speaking off the cuff here about that. But here's the interesting thing. When deep mud hits, it washes out those constructed roads. So my plan all along has been, are the Germans prepared to run the risk of being potentially out of supply for certain periods of time, with the view that when there are freezes or there is no deep mud, they will be able to construct enough road and keep enough units in supply to have an in-supply bridgehead and achieve their victory condition. That's kind of the gambit that we're running here, is that we're going to have enough engineering units floating around here, enough forces to screen on the left and the right flank, and penetrate across, create a buffer, right? Hold that bridgehead, and then still be able to connect, if not to the railroad, then to another road here. There's a road that ends right here somewhere when I was looking at the map. Yeah, right here. There's a road, and then there's another road here that we could connect to a rail line, or no, that probably won't work actually. But there's a way to connect something down here. I forget where it is. But it's only a small handful of hexes that we need to control if we're smart. 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2 to here. I think maybe there's a bridge here. Nope, there's a bridge here somewhere. Anyway, trust me, I thought this through. I've got this road here, bridge here that we can potentially use. So we can build our roads here. If I get a chain of the engineers going, I can construct the road from one end to the other and meet in the middle, and then we can link up those roads and be in supply. I've got to look and see if I can use a combination of road and rail to achieve the in supply status. Here's another section where I could potentially, just off screen here, all right, just here, we can go 1, 2, 3 to here, build a road to that rail line, and then maybe that combination will allow us to run our supply back off the map. Which, if the Soviets see what's going on, that may inform their decision to attack through here, for instance. So there's lots of decision making going on, kind of a little bit on the fly here. Germans are building some defensive lines here to reinforce their positions so that if they are attacked from this flank, they will have no gaping holes. These marshy hex sides are very difficult to attack across, so it'll be a case of fighting across the rivers. Now, come turn 6, all of these forces are going to be released, right? The 6th of February, I think it is, not turn 6, 6th of Feb. They'll be released. So we've got to be in position to screen off and fight these guys who fortunately all have very weak initial combat factors, right? So they have to get a lot of units surrounding the Germans to be effective in their combats, unless they can pile on some arty to give it some heft. Now, when Second Army comes, different story. They have 12 combat factor attack forces, 8 combat factor attack forces, very powerful, and they will rip the Germans a new one once they decide where they're going to focus. And wherever they focus, they will break through. Just as the Germans have broken through here against the Soviet defenses. There's a nice little combination of units you can use. Use an AT gun and 2 infantry units from the same division. It's going to give you some nice modifiers on your defense. So you get some regimental integrity, and you'll get the bonuses from the AT guns, sort of pushing down the odds, unless the Germans have enough armor to overcome those, and their own regimental integrity bonuses. So it's been pretty interesting little battle. All right, that's a bit of a long video, a little bit of a waffle on there. Sorry for the longness, the length of this one. We'll keep at it, and we'll talk to you soon. All the best, and roll those dice.